We have seen air service resume after the tropical depression swept over the island yesterday. Now over here to my left there is a large cargo aircraft lowering its rear hatches. Landing gear doors usually are closed in the landing phase of flight, and that indicates to us some type of hydraulic issue. Here at berth number 9 at the Port of Savannah, you're looking at one of the largest cargo ships in the world. It's the CMA CGM Leo. On board, plenty of goods to go around all up and down the East Coast. When this DC-10 was made by Douglas back in the 80s, nobody could have ever imagined it would end up here in Albuquerque with the 10 Tanker Group. Good evening from Charlotte Douglas Airport, where all eyes are on the FAA and American Airlines. We are on board the Goodyear blimp. It's one of the largest dirigibles in the world.
I see how quiet it is.
Very quiet.
And if you were to have this train come up on your car, it is not going to stop on a dime. It'll take a mile to come to a stop. That allows many balloons to take off from Balloon Fiesta Park right here, head out south, catch a wind drift, come back, and land right here. This is one of the most dangerous times. It's starting to rain right now. Visibility may be reduced. That's when the airlines were experiencing their worst years, and it was all due to the cost of fuel. It's going to allow that aircraft to avoid any of the complicated departure procedures. They can hold upwards of 200,000 pounds of fuel. They burn about 6.5 tons of fuel per hour. Now, the reason they're rationing that fuel is you can fill up a lot of smaller jets with that fuel they could get someplace else.
Chief Transportation Correspondent Hawker Vanguard, very familiar with the aviation industry, been through this a lot, joins us to explain how crews handle these kind of emergencies. Now, have you ever had to have something like this before?
I haven't on my aircraft,
okay.
But hats off to the crew of 2036 because their training went into action. They did what they had to. That aircraft landed, and especially the guys up front, the flight tech, they got that plane on the ground. But let me tell you about what that aircraft was doing. It was American Airlines Flight 2036 going from New York's LaGuardia Airport to Charlotte Douglas. This is a look at the radar from FlightAware.com. It was on the descent into Charlotte, though, that the flight attendants and the passengers noticed an odor in the cabin. They let the flight deck know something was the matter. And according to air traffic control conversations and a statement from American Airlines, a lithium-ion battery fire was the source of that smell and that reported fire from the pilots there. So that caught the flight attendants' attention. You'll see at the end there that the airplane actually makes a 360-degree turn back to Greensboro, and it landed without incident at the airport. The fire trucks, well, they were close behind. They followed that aircraft to the gate where it safely let those people off.
And what we were hearing from earlier before you came on, that was the pilot speaking there. Now, you heard him say the fire is contained, something along those lines. Yeah. I think he said it was also in the bag. But when you have a fire like this, what is the most dangerous?
So thermal runaway. If you're not familiar with a lithium-ion battery, we have them in our phones and our tablets. And you remember the Samsung Galaxy thing from years ago. It all has to do with what kind of battery we have going on in that cell phone. So the thermal runaway, think of it like this. You've all had maybe a birthday cake with those trick candles that when you blow them out, they reignite. That's what we're dealing with when we come to lithium-ion batteries. So it's the same deal with those fires, and you're going to use a fire containment bag just like the one you see on your screen there. Flight attendants, in some cases, when it's safe to do so, they'll take the device, they'll place it in that fire containment bag, and then use non-alcoholic liquids to make sure it stays cool, because we don't want the device to get so hot that it starts busting off again with another fire. Because once you put it out, it could restart again. So they're really sketchy to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. A scary situation that was there. It's so interesting when you see things like that. You know, a device you never even thought about. It's a bag. You can just put something inside of it, and it'll help put out a fire. It's unbelievable.
And you know, our muscle memory as flight attendants, we go to recurrent training every year. We call it continuing qualification, and that's the type of thing we do every year so that when an emergency breaks out on board the aircraft, our hands just know what to do. We know what equipment to go for when.
Right. Got to save passengers' lives there. All right, Hawker, thank you very much. Very informative there.
Goods made in other countries bound for the United States make it here one way. Intermodal containers. Those are metal boxes made to fit on ships, trains, and trucks. It's a transportation link in our supply chain that's right now holding on by a thread in some places. Savannah, Georgia, population 145,000. One of the few places on Earth where shipping containers outnumber people most days.
Maritime shipping has been a part of our supply chain basically since the beginning of recorded history. And as far as the Southeast U.S. is concerned, Savannah is basically the epicenter.
The pulse of one of our nation's largest ports runs up and down the inland waterways connecting Savannah to the Atlantic Ocean. Their footprint continues to grow. Berth Number 1 is the port's latest project to handle even the biggest ships. Cordell Intermodal Vice President Robert Kaiser.
We are uniquely set up, the mousetrap that we've created, and the fact that we operate in a very similar manner to an ocean terminal and how we treat the containers, how we handle the containers.
Between January and November of 2021, the number of shipments handled jumped 6% over the previous year.
Right. It won't go straight over and down. It'll go angle coming down.
14,000 loads of Charlotte-bound cargo began its journey on this dock. It's on large gantry cranes just like this one, where operators take the large intermodal containers off of the ship and down hundreds of feet below to awaiting trucks. Millions of truckers make up the transportation backbone of our country. They connect foreign ships to our local stores. And since 2019, the sector experienced record attrition. Now the challenge is keeping people behind the wheel of a tough, male-dominated line of work.
Are you ready to ride?
Clarissa Rankin says she's in it for the long haul. The biggest need right now is in those over-the-road long-haul truck drivers, and that's something that you can't just pick up, right? It requires lots of training, time, and even an entire lifestyle change.
A lot of people ain't gonna do that. It's a sacrifice you gotta put aside to become a trucker. And a lot of, even some of these men, like, they the bread of their household, they're not leaving their house. Or they're not leaving their job because everybody depending on their income.
Trucker training can last up to a year depending on state and truck line. Once you earn a CDL, you're not done there. You still have to apply for and complete additional courses. Those endorsements allow drivers to haul specialty loads like tankers and dangerous goods.
You don't gotta go OTR. You don't gotta go regional. You can be a local driver and make over $18 an hour. You can be a yard jockey, and that's what moving trailers from trailer to warehouse,
which is our weakest link in the chain right now, moving product on time. That's pushing our network way beyond its limit. Steel wheels on steel tracks that in the blink of an eye can steal your life.
When you're dealing with equipment this big and this fast or this destructive, you don't really typically have small accidents. When you get hurt in this industry, usually it's a decapitation or a loss of a limb.
Stephen Weathers, Assistant Chief Mechanical Officer on the Aberdeen, Carolina and Western Railroad, says despite taking every precaution, deadly encounters and collisions are far too often part of the job.
We just train our engineers to try to keep a watchful eye for people and for cars and try to think about or anticipate their movement, what they're going to do.
According to Operation Lifesaver, 13 people from North Carolina were killed in railroad incidents last year. Only one of the 13 died when their vehicle was struck at a crossing. The rest were pedestrians trespassing on the tracks.
At the end of the day, there's really not a whole lot you can do to stop a moving train.
Every 3 hours in the United States, either a person or a car is hit by a train. First responders say that victims who survive always tell them they never heard the train coming, which is why we wanted to demonstrate to you just how quiet these locomotives are. What you're about to see should not be attempted at home. These videos were made under the strict supervision of the Aberdeen, Carolina and Western Railroad.
All right, Mr. Whitley, we're ready on this end. You can bring them ahead when you're ready.
All right, young man, come your way.
At the controls, railroad veteran Christopher Whitley throttling this locomotive towards us at 20 miles an hour with no horn or bell to replicate the likely chance an engineer wouldn't see a person on the tracks until it's too late. Keep in mind that even at this slow speed, it could take a mile or more to stop that train. Lights, bells, and horns are only used at crossings and on other movement areas. That's why engineers rely on pedestrians and drivers to stay out of the way, to look and listen for oncoming trains. Christopher Whitley says despite that, collisions still happen.
It happens way too often. everywhere, sometime during that trip, you're either got a pedestrian or an automobile that's going to try to get across in front of you. Every day.
I've seen several engineers that they had to quit because the visions they get, and they almost never complete their tour of duty for that day.
The impact of losing a life on the rails devastates the family of a victim, but it's also a burden engineers and conductors have to carry with them as well. Christopher Whitley says that the deadly encounters railroaders deal with in their career never truly leave their mind, even after they've left the scene.
They always tell you it gets easier. It never gets easy because there's someone who's not going home that evening.
Some of your more seasoned engineers that have done this once or twice, they get kind of used to it, but especially your younger crowd, 5 to 10 years and under, and it's their first accident or their second accident, they don't always cope with it very well. They have to take a considerable amount of time off work.
The train versus human matchup is no game when lives are on the line. The outcome is always certain, always has, always will be, for one reason.
Train always wins. They have no conscience.
In Charlotte, I'm Hawker Vanguard.